You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt, coming to you on March 29th of 2022. So sorry of missing last week. We were actually basically like 10 minutes away from finishing the recording, had a software glitch, lost the entire file, and we just didn't have time throughout the week to make it up. But luckily, not too much has happened through this week, so we'll be able to push all the stuff from last week's episode into this one. And fill you guys all in on that. But before we get to all of that stuff, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing pretty well. I hate that happened last week, but it is what it is. And we had a hard time. I was really busy the rest of the week, and I know you were busy too. So I actually spent very little time at home the rest of the week. I had tons of stuff going on. I was in a wedding this weekend, and I had my normal stuff on Wednesday and on Friday as well. So it's like it was pretty busy, but we're here this week, and we're gonna have this hopefully not go off without a hitch, and we'll see. And I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, so let's jump right in because we're gonna have to speed some things along here. But we'll go ahead and start with signings in the first portion, and then we'll jump down to the couple trades we had at the end. But we'll go ahead and start with Anthony Rizzo re-signing with the Yankees on a 2-year, $32 million contract.
Yeah, so Anthony Rizzo is still a pretty good player. Obviously, last year with the Cubs and the Yankees, his last 2 years he's really put up a stat line that isn't super indicative of how good he still is. 2020, he's been bit by the bad luck bug a little bit. He's not gonna be like a 300 type hitter, and he's not as good as he once was. But his batting average on balls in play has dipped big time in the last 2 years, and I'm sure part of that is probably his profile. He's lost a little bit of speed, that's part of it. Probably rolling over the ball just a little bit more, but at the same time, he's his plate discipline numbers are pretty similar, and his batting average on balls in play is just way lower than his career average of 283. It's dropped 25 points. So if he can get something close to projection systems like him to increase that some, and if he can bring that that batting average on balls in play up a little bit, he still hits the ball hard. He's still got power. Hit 22 home runs last year in 141 games. Gets on base a lot. 344 last year, and that's with some of that bad luck, but a high walk rate. Last year was actually a career low walk rate. Outside of 2012 when he only played 87 games. He's usually hovering at a 10 to 12% walk rate, and I would expect to see that back up this year. But his strikeouts remained low. He had a good year, and at Yankee Stadium, having a full year there, I could see the power take a little bit more of a surge than it has. Wrigley's not a bad hitter's park, especially when the wind's blowing out, but it can be a little bit of a inconsistent hitter's park, and Yankee Stadium with that short porch could be great. Rizzo is a guy who could still be a pretty good or a productive first baseman, and it's a good fallback option for the Yankees who, maybe aren't, who maybe didn't have maybe lost out on their couple star players they were looking at. So.
Yeah, and Rizzo's really going to help fit that clubhouse. He's going to really keep that clubhouse, tighten it, and like you mentioned, a full season in a ballpark like Yankee Stadium, I think that's only going to help him at all. He really struggled. Even the numbers look pretty similar between the Cubs and the Yankees, but once he went to the Yankees, he got COVID, and he said like once he got back, it really, it took him a while to really feel like himself again. So it will be interesting to see if he can, parlay, getting back to in the Yankee Stadium a full season into like his old, self of what we really expect from Anthony Rizzo on a yearly basis. But let's go ahead and jump over to your Atlanta Braves. They made a couple signings the past week, and with Eddie Rosario getting a 2-year, $18 million deal with the club option for 2023, and also signing Kenley Jansen to a 1-year, $16 million deal.
Yeah, so the Eddie Rosario signing to start off with, I thought that was a pretty good signing. Eddie Rosario played extremely well after getting to Atlanta last year. Really played the best baseball of his career in that stretch. He took off, especially in the postseason. But you look at his numbers from when he went to Atlanta last year. He only played in 33 games. If you don't remember when he got there, he was injured. but he put up .6 WAR in just 33 games, a 133 WRC plus, a 271 average, 330 on base. He spiked his walk rate after he got to Atlanta. His strikeout rate has always been low. It's a guy who's going to put the ball in play, and he can hit for some power. He's a good RBI guy, and he'll hit in the middle of the Braves order somewhere. And he's just a great depth outfielder to have. As a guy who's going to start most games, going to probably start in left field for the Braves this year. And he's a very good player, and I'm glad that the Braves were able to re-sign him on what looks to be a pretty friendly contract for the team, only $9 million a year, and then you get that club option. So I think this is also a guy who I think he's about to play over the next couple of years. Will probably be playing his best baseball. I don't think he's played. I think he's just getting into his kind of his peak. So I don't expect him to be a superstar or a all-star the next 3 years, but as a solid everyday player, I could definitely see him doing a nice job, in 2022, and then for the 2 years after that.
Yeah, it's a really good signing from Eddie Rosario, and from the Brave standpoint, like you mentioned, once he got over there, he kind of transformed into a different player. He really struggled to begin the year, and really established himself, especially in that playoffs. He just took it to another level there, and it's a really good signing. 2 years with the potential for a third year. It feels just like a fit for both sides. And Rosario will probably man left field, like you mentioned, and then jumping over to Kenley Jansen. That's just going to help create like one of those super pins like we saw with the Royals when they were making their runs for the World Series and stuff. Like that bullpen is going to be really nasty. It allows Will Smith to push up to the 7th or the 8th. Matt's sick. They're going to get Kirby Yates back. They signed Colin McHugh this offseason. Like that bullpen is going to be disgusting. And once with the question marks around the back half of that rotation, who's it going to be? Is Tucker Davidson going to be it? Is it going to be Kyle Wright? Like who's going to be there at the back end behind, Morton, Anderson, Freed, and then maybe if you get Soroka back, you're not going to have to push those starters, especially early on in the year where teams are really worried about the innings. With the short ramp up on the starters, you're going to be able to push that bullpen after 5 innings and not have to worry about if it's a close game or if you have a 1-run lead that they're going to give that up most nights.
Yeah, and you mentioned that bullpen, the back end, but it's really the depth to me too, because you add to that list, you had AJ Minter and Luke Jackson that you didn't even mention in that bullpen. It's like 5-6 deep of guys who have some closing experience and have put up multiple elite seasons. And then you go back and you look at some of the guys who are in the upper minors for the Braves. They still have a lot of guys that could slide into the back end of that rotation, as you mentioned. Tucker Davidson. You look at Kyle Wright, Kyle Muller, Huascari Noah, like all those type of guys, and then you also add in a couple of top prospects like Spencer Strider, who's out there throwing 100 miles an hour and pitched out of the bullpen at the end of the season last year a little bit. Dylan Lee, who actually started one of the World Series games as an opener. But that's kind of a couple of guys that you look at as maybe they add even more depth as young, unproven guys who could be really good in the bullpen. So this is a bullpen that's going to be nasty, and I think that's just something they'd been doing their homework on closers. And Will Smith last year as a closer, he was a little bit inconsistent. I mean, he gave up some home runs last year, and I think that they really wanted Kenley Jansen to come in and just be a lockdown ninth inning guy, because after some struggles at the very beginning of the year last year, he mixed his pitches a little bit better later on, and he was unbelievable in the postseason. So this is a great signing for the Braves. Low risk because it's a 1-year deal, and you get what could be one of the better closers in baseball this year.
Absolutely, he's still at top of his game, as I watched pretty much every game last year. But let's go ahead and jump over. And this one's kind of more of a feel-good signing rather than an impact signing. But Zach Greinke signs a 1-year, $13 million deal to return to the Kansas City Royals, where he was originally drafted.
Yeah, so Zach Greinke obviously is I think a future Hall of Famer. I think most people would agree with me. He's put up 64 wins above replacement in his career. Still a pretty useful pitcher. He'll eat some innings for them. He's not going to throw very hard. He's only throwing in the upper 90s on average now with his fastball velocity. His strikeout rate really dipped last year. He had some injury concerns late in the season. He only threw 171 innings. but he's been a very durable workhorse for his entire career. And I mean, this is a guy who is, 2020 put up a 4 ERA but a 280 FIP, and in 2019 put up a 322 FIP and a 293 ERA between the Astros and the Diamondbacks. So this is a guy who, if you take out 2020, he's still, his last few years have still been good on average. And he had a little bit by some unlucky home run per fly ball rates last year, where he gave up the career high on home runs per fly ball, which you would expect to drop, probably not to the level that it's been at in the past, but to a more reasonable level. He averages on each fly ball, he averages a 10% chance of a home run being a fly ball being a home run in his career. Last year that was up to 17%. That's something that typically a pitcher is not going to control too much of. So if that dips back down a little bit, he had his expected numbers were pretty good last year. So he could still be useful for Kansas City, and he'll add some veteran presence to that rotation. It's got a bunch of young guys, and I mean it'll be great to see him close out this his career where it started, and he built his name as an ace in the big leagues. So I'm excited to see what Zach Greinke go back to where he started, and finish out what's been an incredible career.
Yeah, it's just gonna, it's gonna be cool seeing him back in Kansas City in that uniform again, kind of just how our childhoods kind of were, where he really began to ascend to that Cy Young level he was. I think it's really going to help that young pitching staff. They have guys like Kyle Bubich and Daniel Lynch, and who's the other one? Zimmer.
We
I'm
have
gonna say
Brady Singer.
Brady Singer. That's it. They're gonna be able to help. Greinke's one of the smartest baseball minds around. He's a guy who truly understands the art of pitching and not just being able to throw. So he's gonna be able to give those young guys some valuable lessons throughout the year, some good advice that will help them maybe take that next step forward in their game. So it's really cool to see. I was hoping he might have went to a contender and got another chance at making a World Series run, but going back to Kansas City, it kind of, it's right up there with what he could have done. But let's go ahead and jump over to the next one, and that's the Chicago Cubs signing import Seiya Suzuki to a 5-year, $85 million deal.
Yeah, so Seiya Suzuki's a guy who, by all accounts, a lot of people like him, and some people don't. He's it's a mystery whenever you go overseas, to Japan or Korea to look for a player. You just never know what you're gonna get. You could sign a guy who looks really good over there and is the next big thing, and you can sign him to a really team friendly contract because of the risk of it, that teams aren't going to put up a huge fight. Or you could sign a guy to a big contract who's basically never useful as a big leaguer. You could look at some examples. I mean, Shohei Ohtani came from the same. It's a little different situation. He seems a lot younger, but he's obviously worked out and overperformed his contract. You look at Ha-Seong Kim from the Padres. Hasn't exactly lived up to his contract yet, but it could have easily flipped the other way. It could have easily ended up that Kim was fantastic and Ohtani wasn't. You just never know when you go overseas to Korean KBO or NPB for a guy. And Seiya Suzuki's a guy who's got a lot of talent. A lot of people really like his swing. Think he's got good power potential. They love his plate discipline. Um, the question marks when you come from over there, the baseball's a little bit different. You in the U.S., most guys in the big leagues throwing a lot harder. He hasn't faced the velocity he's gonna face in the big league level, and through the first couple of spring training games he's played, you've seen that he hasn't adjusted yet. It might take him a little bit of time to do so, but you kind of go through looking at the projection systems. I mean, it's widely different. Like one of the projection systems has him projected for a negative 1.2 wins above replacement, and one of them has him projected for 4.1 wins above replacement. So it's just one of those things where it's like there's a very wide range of ways this can work out. But I think it's good for the Cubs, obviously, to be aggressive and get a guy who would be a value if he is what they think he could be. This could end up being one of those rare big contracts is very team friendly. So we'll see what happens with Seiya Suzuki, but it's definitely an interesting move.
Yeah, I'm on the side of I really like this move, and I really like Seiya Suzuki. He just seems like a guy that will come over and be able to adapt. Maybe it might take him through half the year or going into next season, but he's a guy who, like you said, plate discipline is a lot better than most guys that have come over. Um, the way his swing is, he's able to get his foot down a lot faster than most do. He doesn't have as big of a leg kick, um, and his hands are just his really quick from the time that he gets his foot down to be able to get through the ball. So I really like Seiya Suzuki. I think he's going to transition really well for the Cubs. And honestly, the 5 year, $85 million deal, at the end of it, I think you could see that possibly being a steal of a contract for the Cubs. Also noting that they did sign Jonathan VR, Drew Smiley, and Michael Givens to 1 year deals as well. Just help supplement the depth there. And VR might actually get a lot more playing time than people think. He allows them to if Nico Horner, who hasn't been able to stay healthy, um, you know is out, or if, Nick Madrigal, who's coming off of a severe hamstring injury and actually had surgery on it in the offseason, is not ready. VR could be a really good ad for them.
Yeah, VR is kind of a weird player because he's got a super high strikeout rate, but which doesn't go along with his profile. But he also is a great base runner, and he gets on base at a pretty good clip. He was at 322 last year on base, and he put up over 2 wins above replacement last year and only 500 plate appearances as a utility guy for the Mets. So I actually like the VR signing, but I could have done without the other two. I mean, I definitely don't think that the Drew Smiley signing is going to work out much at all. And then, of course, Michael Givens was just kind of, you know, he's one of those pieces that he's had some success as a decent middle reliever in the past, but he's probably not a guy I would have brought in on a big league contract, to be honest. But I think Jonathan VR could be a very useful player for the Cubs.
I absolutely think he can be too. And I think Smiley is just, like you said, I don't know how well that's
Yeah,
going to work out.
he's not
Givens,
very good.
I think Givens could be decent as a middle reliever. And then, they're only 1 year deals. So if you get to the deadline and you're not very good or whatever, you can flip him. And if you are very good, then you have a decent middle reliever. And, I don't think it's all that big of a deal. Like, they're all 1 year deals anyways. So,
Yeah.
but let's move on to the Philadelphia Phillies. They made two big signings, signing Kyle Schwarber to a 4 year, $79 million deal, and they signed Nick Castellanos to a 5 year, $100 million deal.
Yeah, now this is going to be the goofiest team to watch ever because these guys are going to be possibly the worst defensive team in MLB history this year. I mean, they are just they do not care about playing any defense, but they got two mashers. I mean, Kyle Schwarber can really hit. Last year he took a major step forward on at the plate. It was by far his best season. He did spend a lot of time injured, but he hit 32 home runs in 113 games, 266, 374, 554. A lot of it did come within one real big hot streak that he had mid-season when he was in his last final days with the Nationals, which I mean, that's kind of been a theme for him, and maybe the fact that when he was kind of starting to cool off a little bit, he got injured, maybe cut out some of the rate stats. He might have dropped down some on that, but still, he had a best year of his career last year, and this is a guy who's going to get on base and he's going to slug, not going to have a high average, which is fine. That's the profile they're looking for there. And then Nick Castellanos is, a guy who maybe more of a well-rounded hitter. Doesn't walk as much, but he doesn't strike out as much. Hits for a lot of power. Last year 309 average, 362 on base, 576 slugging, 4 wins above replacement last year was really nice. He wasn't quite as bad defensively as I thought he was last year either. He wasn't good, but he wasn't like the worst defender in baseball, like he has been in the past. But these are both guys who, honestly, it's puzzling to me because the Phillies now have like 6 designated hitters on their team. You got, Hoskins really should be a DH. Bohm should be a DH. Schwarber should be a DH. Castellanos should be a DH. I mean, you're really and Gregorius is a terrible shortstop. I don't know about DH, but he doesn't need to be playing shortstop. And you're really looking at, other than Real Muto behind the plate, your best defensive player is probably either Bryce Harper or Gene Segura, and either one of those guys are known for being great defenders. So it's kind of puzzling to see what they're going to do, with their defensive alignment. But we'll see. It's gonna be entertaining. They're gonna have some high scoring games there, and I bet Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler are not very happy with the front office on their decision making. But we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun offensive team for to watch for sure, and you might see games where they score more points than the Eagles did on average this year, just because they're going to have to be able to win games. But like you said, the defense is very, very bad. I mean, coming into 2021, their defense was like second worst in history, and everyone's just pretty much got worse through that. And I think right now the plan, I think, is Obdubo Herrera to be playing center field. And I think even he got injured, so I don't think he's even going to be ready for opening day. And they just traded Adam Hazley today, so I'm not quite sure what that whole plan is. Maybe we're in for more Bryce Harper in center field or something.
That
But
that would be the dumbest thing they could do.
dude, that would be the ultimate Phillies move, though, wouldn't it?
Yep,
Like,
it really would.
but you know, overall the signings aren't bad. Like the value of the signings for each player they're very good. Like they're right around what you would expect. Just the fit with the Phillies is what makes it a little weird. Like if they would have signed one of these guys and then went out and made a different move for, maybe a center fielder or moving Didi and getting a different shortstop in, like it would have made perfect sense in that scenario. But these two signings together to the Phillies, it doesn't make a lot of sense over the defensive side of the ball, which has been your big issue the past couple of years. Like you've been able to score, enough runs. Like if you would just help support your pitching staff a little bit more and build up that bullpen, that's been a big issue, then you would have been a better team. But now you're just full on going into we're just going to try and score more than everyone. We're going to have 11 to 12 shootouts every night or something. So it really sucks for guys like Zach Wheeler and then Aaron Nola, because they are really good, especially Aaron Nola, who's so much of a ground ball pitcher. But it's gonna be fun to watch them on the offensive side of the ball. At least that's all I can say about it.
No doubt.
But let's go ahead and jump over to the next one, and that's Chris Bryant signs a 7-year, $182 million deal with the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, so Chris Bryant obviously is a really good player, former MVP. Definitely the last 4 years is nothing like his first 3 years in the big leagues, where he was over 6 wins above replacement every year and won that MVP in 2016 with an 8 wins above replacement season. But 2020 he dealt with injuries a lot. 2018 dealt with injuries a lot. He's still on a rate basis, been a really good player. And you look at his 2021, and I mean 3.6 wins above replacement. He's not quite the same guy as he was in his first couple of years. Those injuries probably have slowed him down a little bit. I don't think he hits the ball quite as hard as he did, but he's still a guy who is a very well-rounded guy at the plate. Hits well. Still hits for power. 25 home runs last year. He's still, he strikes out. He's never been a very low strikeout guy, but I mean, he's not crazy high. 23% last year was a little high, but typically in his career he's been more in that 20% ish range. Um, he gets on base. He's a good on base guy. Walks a lot. He's patient at the plate. He's a guy who's going to do well in Colorado at the plate. I could see him putting up a couple of really, really good seasons at the plate. Defensively, he's taken a little bit of a step back. Injury probably has part to do with that. They move him around a lot. That's a lot where a lot of his defensive value comes from. But 7 years, 182 million. That seems like it's a little high for Chris Bryant at this stage. But he's a guy that, I mean, for the Rockies, they need players that are really, have upside, and he's one of them. I mean, it is puzzling that the Rockies are out there spending money after, what happened with Arenado and then not bringing back Story. It's kind of one of those deals where, are you all in? Are you not all in? But I mean, I like to see them spend money. I mean, go sign somebody, and it's a 7-year deal, so maybe you can't go all in this year because of, issues with your current roster, but next year maybe you can do it. And I could see them being somewhat competitive. Their pitching staff is a lot better than people think it is. So maybe some of their young, position players do well, like Brendan Rodgers, or I think they have a higher level prospect too down there, and then maybe Charlie Blackman has a bounce back year, or something. They could maybe stay in contention for a wild card spot with the expanded postseason. But I don't really see them being great. But it'll be interesting, and I think for Chris Bryant, it's one of those deals where he wanted to go. He wanted to play. He wanted to be in Colorado. He just wanted to play and didn't. He wanted to live there. He wanted to. I don't think he cared quite as much about playing for a contender as much as he cared about getting a great payday and going somewhere he wanted to live. So good for him on that.
Yeah, and another thing you were talking about with Colorado not willing to spend money, they didn't re-sign John Gray either, who had made
Yeah.
very vocal about wanting to stay in Colorado and actually pitched better in Colorado than he did usually on the road. Like you mentioned it right there at the end. I think that's what it was. Is that Bryant kind of didn't really care about going for as much of a winner at the moment, and going for more of a higher payday, which, hey, all for whatever players want to go to where the biggest contract is. Like, good for you guys. It just, I don't see the Rockies being able to compete in the next 3, 4, 5 years, even in the way that the NL West is looking right now. I mean, I know we're going to get to the expanded playoffs in a little bit, but you're going to have, you have the Dodgers, the Padres, even the Giants will always find a way to be good. You're going to have the NL East, which the Braves are going to be good for a long time. You're going to have the Mets, who are going to always be willing to spend money. They'll always met it as well, but they'll spend them enough money to get them competitive. Like, I just don't know where you're going to fit in there, along the lines, because you're going to have to overpay people to come into Colorado. Like, you this is kind of probably a little bit of an overpay for Chris Bryant. Like, you're not going to ever get pitchers to volunteer to come there unless you pay them astronomically over their value. And one thing that the two is, they did sign Ryan McMahon to a 6-year, $70 million contract extension. I think it was last week as well. So that helps, keep him in the fold for a long time. But I just don't see where the Rockies are going to get to that competitive level anytime soon. That really makes the Bryant deal, from their end at least, make sense.
Right.
But we'll stay in the NL West, and we'll go over to the LA Dodgers, who agreed to terms on a 6-year, $162 million contract with Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, so I think we've talked about Freddie Freeman a lot here, but I feel the same way about it as I would have, with him potentially signing. When I talked about him potentially signing back with the Braves, he's a guy he's a really good player. He's still good. He's potentially on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He really didn't have that far to go before he would be in that conversation. If he can put up 2 or 3 more, solid seasons like his career averages have been, he would probably get in that 60 WAR range, which would put him in right in consideration, especially with an MVP and a World Series championship he's had. But he adds a lot to the Dodgers lineup for 2022. I've said all along that I thought 6 years, he's a guy who's going to be a 37-year-old first baseman, and you're going to be paying him $25 million at that point. Like, it's something that it's tough for teams, but if anybody can eat money, it would be the Dodgers. If they could take a risk on a guy who maybe in 2027 isn't quite, or at age 37, first baseman isn't quite as good as he is now, they can get the good out of him, and then he doesn't have to be that guy for the entire length of his contract. They don't have, because they don't have, money's not a factor for them. But yeah, I mean, Freddie Freeman will do well there. He's a guy who just very consistent, hits the ball well, sprays at all fields. His, I mean, there's not really too much bad to say about him. I mean, the only thing that worries you a little bit is his defense has really declined over the past few years after being probably one of the better defensive first basemen in the game. um, 2019, 2021, shortened season 2020, it's hard to judge defense on that small sample size. But 2019, 2021, the defense hasn't really been that good. But, you can always slide him over to DH when the day comes that you need to. It is kind of a weird fit because the Dodgers have a couple other guys who were like Max Muncy was playing first. I guess he'll play second now, which is maybe defensively not the best option, but it'll be Freddie Freeman will do really well in LA, I think, and he'll be a good addition to an already great lineup. So
Yeah, Freddie basically ends up fitting the hole that Corey Seager left in the lineup as a left-handed bat. Um, you know, Muncy, like you said, he will slide over to second. He actually enjoys playing second much more. It just helps create that depth that LA is always known for. Like you're going to be pushing guys like Gavin Lux and who was a top prospect at one time to the bench. You're going to have Chris Taylor, who's still going to be having to try and find that utility role. Like, and some days you're going to push AJ Pollock to the bench, who's had a really good past couple years. Like, it just helps create that depth overall. But I don't. Freddie's a better offensive upgrade over Seager, but it's not going to be all that much different. When you look at the lineup construction or whatever, basically one left-handed bat goes in for a little bit, a little bit worse left-handed bat. And Freddie gets to go home where he grew up in Southern California, and he made a big deal about that in his press conference, like that he's going to have his grandpa and his dad be able to come and watch him every single day, which they haven't been able to do since high school, and that. So it's a good fit overall. It fits the Dodgers because of that left-handed bat, and being able to just move the guys over and help create that depth that they usually like to have. And then for Freddie to be able to go home where he grew up and get a big payday for it as well. And like you said, if there's a team that will be able to help a guy age gracefully, it's usually the Dodgers. Like they've done a pretty decent job with Justin Turner the past couple of years as he's getting up to that age 36, 37 type years. Kind of take less games on your feet and take a couple extra days here and there. So it'll be interesting to see how they allow that to progress as this contract moves over to the back end of it. But let's jump over to the next one, and that's with Jorge Soler signing a 3-year, $36 million deal with the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, so Jorge Soler, last time we saw baseball or baseball that counted was he won the World Series MVP. So definitely a guy who is a high profile signing, and he's kind of a little bit like Eddie Rosario in the fact that he was very bad. In fact, last year he had a negative WAR on the season. He was awful, and then got traded to Atlanta and just took off. I mean, he showed some signs of it his last couple weeks in Kansas City, and got traded for really basically nothing, and he absolutely mashed the cover off the ball after he got to Atlanta. 269 average, 358 on base, 524 slugging after the trade in 55 games, put up a full win above replacement. And one of the things you like about what Soler did was that he cut down on his swinging strikes. He swung and missed a lot less. His strikeout rate took a nosedive, and which was something that had plagued him in 2020. He had a 34% strikeout rate. Last year in Kansas City, 27%, which is right along his career norms. After he got to Atlanta, it was down to 18.5%, which was fantastic. And then he also had a better eye than he's ever had last year, which he's always been fairly patient. Over 10% walk rate, but he looked really good last year. The one thing that you worry about with Soler for sure is his defense, which he really probably should be DHing, but obviously we have DH in the National League now. You look at the Marlins as a team that they do have a couple guys already who are probably should be DHs, like Garrett Cooper, Jesus Aguilar. I mean, they have some guys who are probably more valuable to be DHs, but Soler, if you need to throw him out there, he's not a disaster in the corner outfield, but he probably should be DHing. So, but definitely a guy that if he can continue that form he showed in Atlanta, could be a huge payoff for the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, Soler, when he's on, like we saw when he got to Atlanta and through the postseason, he's one of the more feared power hitters in the game. Um, he's a guy who can easily turn on any pitch and send it about 500 feet. And really for a guy who has that much power, and like you said, he doesn't really he walks more than you would think. Like he's up to an 11% walk rate pretty much on his career. He was 11-1 last year. only a 24% strikeout rate, which is for a guy like that, you would probably expect to see that in the upper 20s or even low 30s for the type of power he can supply. The fit's weird a little bit in Miami just because they have so many corner outfielders already. Or people that can play corner outfield, and they are really lacking that true kind of center fielder type. But it's good to see the Marlins spending money. Supposedly they were interested in Nick Castellanos before the lockout happened. After, then we know with everything with Derek Jeter and them leaving, and then, but it is nice to see them at least going out there and spending some money on the free agent market and getting a guy who can really impact their offense, because that pitching rotation is really good. Like, they got Sandy Alcantara, you got Pablo Lopez, Trevor Rogers. You're going to have Sixto Sanchez and Edward Cabrera coming up soon. Max Mayers looked incredible in spring training. You even have Eliza Hernandez. Like, that rotation will be really, really good as long as you can get them some offensive help around. And I think even they upgraded catcher because they went and got Jacob Stallings from the Pirates as well. So that helps solidify more of a defensive catcher for them, which is something they had lacked really in the past couple years.
Yeah, the Marlins have had a sneaky good offseason, and don't forget the signing of Garcia in the outfield.
Yeah.
That was a nice signing too, and they got even more farm system minor leaguers that are close, like JJ Bleday. It's going to be a really good big leaguer, and Yuri Perez, another pitcher. Like, they're loaded in the pitch in the rotation depth and in the upper minors, and I think they could be a sneaky good team here in the next year or two. But moving on to our next one, this is the most surprising signing of the offseason probably, and that is that the Minnesota Twins signed Carlos Correa to a 3-year, $105 million deal that does have an opt out after each season.
Yeah, so it is a really weird deal. With the Twins, they were always somebody that was kind of on the back burner of teams that could be sneaky into the Correa market. I think we always all expected, probably the Tigers, mostly the Yankees, the Astros to be in on it. But I think what it really came down to is that Scott Boras, right before the lockout, or just like about a couple weeks before the lockout, Correa fired his other agents, signed with Scott Boras. And if Correa was to sign a long-term big contract this year, Scott Boras would not get the accountability, or his cut of that contract. It would have been the prior agency. So basically what this does is it allows Correa to go back out to the market next year under Scott Boras with no qualifying offer attached, and still be at what, age 28 or something. So like, he's still going to be, well before that 30 range. You're going to get at least 2 seasons of him before that. He's going to have no qualifying offer, so you don't have to give up a pick for him next year. So Correa will sign like a massive deal next year, as long barring he doesn't get hurt. And if he does, then he just opts into this contract. Again, and from the Twins side, like, it's one of those, hey, if we're good this year, then we have a guy by the Carlos Correa. Maybe we can convince him to stay here. If we're not good, well, then we just turn around and flip probably the best player who will be traded at the deadline for whatever haul of prospects we can get. Because maybe that other team will convince him to stay, and they'll be willing to give up more for that. So it's a really good deal from the Twins side. Correa's side, it makes more sense for him in the long term, so he can get the money. Although, as you look at it, like, how competitive do we expect the Twins to be? Because that rotation's not that great. They did sign Joe Smith, a reliever, to a 1-year deal, and Chris Archer to a 1-year deal. But, I don't really expect that rotation to be all that great and them to be, in a competitive spot this year. So I would say more as we're looking towards July, you're going to probably see a lot of rumors about Carlos Correa getting moved, and then potentially at the deadline him getting moved somewhere to some competitor that either has an injury or just looking to upgrade an offensive position.
Yeah, I love the signing for the Twins. Obviously it's a high value, a high number dollar figure, but the Twins lineup is actually really good now. Byron Buxton is going to be at the top of it. They have signed him to an extension last year. You look at Jorge Polanco. He can shift. There was talk that he was going to end up having to play short again, but he's going to be able to shift back to second base, where he's a great player. Carlos Correa is going to sit in there at shortstop. And then you still got Max Kepler in that lineup, and you kind of took Josh Donaldson, who was a really good player, but you kind of flipped him into being able to have Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela to add some depth to that lineup. So you really got a pretty good lineup here. Maybe you could use Alex Kirilloff having that breakout year. He's been a top prospect for a while. I think the real question mark, and the bullpen is still pretty good too. Especially at the back end, Taylor Rogers, Tyler Duffy are both pretty good. So, they did make the trade for Sonny Gray. So that's they do have one pretty nice established starting pitcher. You got to remember that um, that Kenta Maeda is out for most likely the whole year, but it's possible he could come back late in the season, like September. But you got your rotation's really the question mark here, and it's not great. Maybe you can hope that Dylan Bundy finds his 2020 form again. And there's some reasons to think this team could end up being better than you know than people think. But it's definitely going to be a situation where they're kind of a fringe contender. One thing that really helps them is that division that they're in, though. I mean, because you really are going to face the out of true contenders. Really, it's only the White Sox. So I think the Twins kind of vaulted themselves over the Tigers and the Guardians with this trade. So that's definitely something that's going to help them out. Playing in this weak division, they could probably scratch together enough wins to make a wild card run. And but if not, that rotation really does end up costing them. You can obviously Correa would be a very attractive trade piece as a half season piece, and probably not the only trade piece they would have. So definitely an interesting move here. A lot of upside to this roster now. You add in a guy who's probably going to be somewhere between a 4 and 6 win player to a lineup that's already pretty good, and you could hope that maybe the bullpen or maybe the pitching staff can figure it out. There are some young guys there, and you got to remember too that the A's are looking to trade a couple of guys, so maybe the Twins could make a trade for Mania or something that could really add some depth to that rotation. That would help them immensely if they could figure out a way to do that. But um, we'll see what happens. I'm definitely excited to see what they do.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that works out as well because, like you said, that team could be really fun to watch on both sides of the ball. Because Correa's even I think he won the Platinum Glove this year as the best defender in baseball, and then you have Buxton up the middle too, so it's going to be pretty fun defensively on top of the offensive firepower that they have. But let's jump over to the Red Sox, who signed Trevor Story to a 6-year, $140 million deal.
Yeah, so Trevor Story is a very, 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 very good player, and I think people have forgotten that because of how good that this free agent class was at shortstop, that he kind of became the lost name and all that. But there's really not much to not like about him. Obviously, he played in Coors, which is a lot of people dog him for that, but at the same time, he's an excellent defender. He's an excellent base runner, and his contact rates are pretty good. His knock all along was high strikeout guy, but outside of from 2018 to 2019, his strikeout rate went up a tiny bit, but he's really dropped it as an average over his entire career. He had a career low strikeout rate in 2021. He gets on base at a pretty good clip. This year, really bit by some bad luck. A 293 batting average on balls in play this year, which was by far the lowest of his career. Obviously, Coors is always going to inflate some batting average on balls in play because of the spacious outfield, but his career averages were, he was typically around a 340 to 350, and he was 50 points lower, 60 points lower than his career this year. So that's kind of a big deal to him because, if he puts up a normal batting average on balls in play, his number will probably be somewhere in between what he did this last year where he was unlucky and then his normal averages in Coors. I would expect him to put up somewhere like a 320, which would be a pretty nice. I mean, projection systems love him to be a 30 home run guy. Fenway Park's a great place to hit for right-handed hitters, with the monster out there. Um, I mean, I think this is a fantastic signing for Boston. The only thing that I find weird about it is that Trevor Story's value, a lot of it's tied up in being a great shortstop. And they have Xander Bogaerts, and if Xander Bogaerts, who really, I mean, it would make a lot of sense if Story could go play shortstop and Xander Bogaerts could then move to second because, Xander Bogaerts is not the best defender, or really not a good defender at shortstop, even though he's kind of serviceable there. That would make a lot of sense. But there's Xander Bogaerts is an opt out next year, and there's a lot of talk that he does not want to move off shortstop the year before an opt out. So, um, I don't know how that's going to work, but they'd signed a guy to a pretty decent looking contract that could be real, that could pay off really big time for them. So I really liked the signing for Boston.
Yeah, I really think that Story is going to do really well in Fenway as well with that Red Sox lineup. There was some concern about his arm, that he's had some throwing trouble the past year or so, and that a potential move to second base might have been in his future anyways. But I think this is basically just a way like, hey, we're going to try out second base this year. If it works, it works. And then, if Xander opts out next year, you will have the potential to move over to shortstop, for the long term. If we can get Xander back, then you'll just stay at second base and play there. But, the offensive side, the offensive production that I think he's going to bring, he definitely is going to take a step up from what I think we saw him this past season. Like you said, the luck was there. And then also, he was the only one in that lineup that you really had to fear anyways. Like at the beginning of the season, Ryan McMahon was hot, but then he kind of tailed off, after the first couple months. And then everyone could just pitch around Story. So he was having to try and, find a way to make an impact and swing at some pitches he probably normally wouldn't swing at if he had the guy like Arenado behind him or something. So I think going to Boston into a hitters friendly park, into a hitters friendly division, like that division is one of the better hitter friendly divisions in baseball. Going in there, and then now you're going to have guys like JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers, like Alex Verdugo. You're going to have so many guys in that lineup that can help protect you now. Like you'll get more pitches to hit. So I think it's a really good fit. It allows them to strengthen a position for now and kind of hedge themselves going forward, sort of what the Dodgers did with trading for Trey Turner in the middle of the year. Knowing Seager was a free agent, not sure they're going to be able to re-sign him. Well, now Turner just moved back over to shortstop. So I think it's kind of hedging their bets, but I think Story will really bounce back and have a really good year, and we'll look back after this after this next season and probably say that was one of the better, bigger free agent signings of the offseason.
Absolutely.
But let's jump over to St. Louis, where they've signed a couple players, one being Corey Dickerson on a 1-year, $5 million deal. And the bigger news is them signing Albert Pujols to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal for what he announced will be his final season.
Yeah, so first off, Corey Dickerson, he's just a platoon outfielder bench guy. He's going to do fine. He serves a purpose. He can DH them some if they need him to. He could probably play, corner outfield if they need him to. Um, a good left-handed bat to throw in there if you need one. So not in obviously 1-year deal there. Albert Pujols, really cool to see him back playing his final year for St. Louis. He's 21 home runs away from 700, and he's 18 home runs away from Alex Rodriguez at 697. So he's got a chance at those two things there to pass Alex Rodriguez and to potentially get to 700. Based on his last few years, obviously 2020 only 6, but that was the shortened season. 2019 hit 23, 2018 hit 19, last year hit 17, but only in 296 plate appearances. If you could get him, 400 plate appearances, he'd have a shot at getting to that milestone. Which he can still hit left-handed pitching pretty well. He did last year all year, so you never know. But it's going to be really cool to see him back in St. Louis, and I'm sure that they are going to have a blast going out to the ballpark this year and seeing Albert Pujols back in that uniform, even if it's more of a nostalgia thing than anything else. So that's going to be cool.
Yeah, and it's only fitting that he went back to St. Louis, because also it's widely rumored that this will be the last year of Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina's career as well. So basically, it's kind of like a triple swan song for those, especially for those really good Cardinals teams that made World Series runs and won the World Series, in the like 2006 era, right around there. It's just all three of those guys will be able to go out on the one team this year. It's going to be cool to see him back there. Like, I don't know if you saw his entrance into spring training the day
Yeah.
it was basically announced. Like, he walked out from the outfield down the thing, like the entire place is just absolutely buzzing, standing ovation, everything. Like, it's going to be really fun to see that. I really do hope that he gets the 400 plate appearances this year, because he showed last year that he can still hit lefties really well. He still has a ton of that power against lefties, and even the power is still there against righties, but he really can't catch up to the high velocity fastballs as much. He does a lot of his damage on the breaking pitches. So he can run into one on velocity, but I bet that he's probably a guy that they said, like, hey, we're going to let you DH against lefties all the time. You'll get in there for some righties, and then you can be potential power bat off the bench. Late in game situation if we need to maybe try and run into a homer or something. So it's really fun that he's going to be able to go back to St. Louis, and that they're all three of those guys are going to kind of be able to usher that kind of era of Cardinals baseball kind of out, and allow the newer guys to come in and take it over after this season. But let's jump on to basically the last big kind of free agent deal, and it's really more an extension. But Ketel Marte signed a 5-year, $76 million extension with the Arizona Diamondbacks that basically buys out. He had 2 option years left, and it creates 3 new guaranteed years on the deal, and there's also a team option at the end of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Ketel Marte, when he's healthy, is just bonkers. I mean, 2019, you look at his season, in 144 games, which obviously means that he missed 18 games still, but hit 329 with a 389 on base and a 592 slugging. That is insane. 32 home runs, 7 WAR. Plays depth multiple positions and plays them solidly. Plays second base, shortstop, and he's played center field, and all of them at a solid level. He's a good defensive player. You look at him in 2021. I mean, it's injury, 90 games. I mean, in his 90 games, he hit 318 with a 377 on base and a 532 slugging with 14 homers, 139 WRC plus, put up 3 wins above replacement. But it was 90 games. 2020 even was injured, 45 games out of the possible 60. So this is a guy that, I mean, when he's healthy, is one of the best players in the game, and you're getting a bargain on that if you're at Arizona if he's healthy. Obviously, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, so you know it's entirely possible that next year, you get 100 games out of him of being good. So, but we'll see. I love this extension. I'm kind of surprised that he decided to sign back with Arizona, but obviously they've stuck with him. They didn't want to trade him because they could have traded him for an absolute haul over the last year or two, and they want to be the guy that they build around. And he's obviously a guy that could fill that role. I mean, you could build around this guy and build a competitive team around him. So, I'm sure it's exciting for Arizona fans to be able to keep him in as a Diamondback, and it's exciting for him to kind of be the guy that's the glue between what was a pretty good team 2017 2018, and be the glue guy from this rebuild to where when they're competitive again in a couple years, you've got a guy who is experienced and is a really really good all-star caliber player. So definitely cool for Ketel Marte and for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, and you mentioned him not being able to stay healthy. I think a thing that they're going to do is they're going to basically push him to be a full-time second baseman this year. That will kind of help, I believe, keep him a little bit healthier. He played most of his games last year in center field, and I just don't think that his body can take that wear and tear of having to run around there all day long. And especially I believe Arizona's a turf field as well. I could be wrong about that, but um, moving to second base, at least he'll be able to not have to run around all the time, keep his legs a little healthier because I believe he struggled with hamstring injuries more than anything. He's a guy who crushes lefties. I think last year he had 371 average against lefties or 387 against lefties. And that's where more of his power is against from the right side of the plate. So, like you said, he's an absolute star when he's healthy. And I think that move to second base will allow that. There had been talks that they were going to trade him. Even signing this extension, I don't know that in a couple years that it doesn't preclude them from trading him again. I think what it does is it just buys you a couple more years of trying to see if you're good or if your prospects, your rebuild's going the way you want it to. And if it's not, then you can trade Marte then. I think it just helps lock that in because I believe he was going to have an option year after this season. I think he was only through 2022 before those option years kicked in. So I believe it's $51 million of new money on the deal because the option years just became guaranteed. But it's a really good deal for Marte. Gets paid. It's a good deal for the Diamondbacks. Pushes off if you have to trade him for a couple years, and then you guys can move forward and see where you're at from there. But before we jump over to the trade section, there was, like 4 or 5 more lower signings that we just wanted to at least mention. Brad Miller agreed to a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Rangers. Andrew Chafin signed a 2-year, $13 with the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers also signed Michael Pineda to a 1-year deal. And then Archie Bradley and Ryan Tepera both signed 1-year deals with the Angels.
Yeah, I really like the Archie Bradley Tapera deals for the Angels. They have made a good investment in their bullpen this year. They re-signed Rosell Iglesias. They brought in Aaron Loop, and Tapera was really, really good last year. Archie Bradley's a guy who's not a fantastic reliever, but he's a good reliever, and he can fill he's perfect in the middle relief role. They've done a good job of building up their relief staff, especially following up starting pitching staff that's been inconsistent at best. So I definitely like what they've done there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like those deals as well, and I think Chafin is a pretty underrated signing as well for the Tigers, being a good lefty in that bullpen. Because it sounds like Tyler Alexander's probably going to get moved to the starting rotation, at least while Pineda is building up his arm because he's not going to be ready for opening day. But overall, basically, like all of these signings, Miller becomes a utility kind of bench bat DH type for the Rangers, which they kind of can use that around first base, and then being able to give Simeon and Seager days off, becoming DH there. So really good deals overall. But let's go ahead and jump over to the little trade portions. We got 3 trades, 2 of them more of a minor trades, and that's actually not a very good segue into the first trade, which is the Reds acquiring Mike Minor from the Kansas City Royals for relief pitcher Amir Garrett.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a trade of 2 guys who aren't very good right now. Mike Minor, his numbers last year, his ERA was a lot higher than his expected numbers, which were decent. But I think the big thing for him is that he's a free agent at the end of this year. But you have a little more control under Amir Garrett. He's a little bit younger. You might have a little more upside there as a quality reliever, and he's cheaper. And if you're Kansas City, you can shift him or you can pull him in and have a guy who maybe there's definitely still some potential there for Amir Garrett to be a good reliever. And then you look at Mike Minor as a guy who, there's potential for him to, last year a 429 FIP isn't that bad. The expected numbers and the batted ball numbers match that up. He had a 5.05 ERA, but he was honestly a lot better than that. So maybe he can be kind of a salvage project for the Reds, who have done a pretty good job with those, salvage projects like that in the past. That if you remember, Sonny Gray has been a highly thought of big leaguer for a long time, but after he went to the Yankees for that year or year and a half or whatever he was there, like his stock had like plummeted, and then he came back to Cincinnati and was fantastic there. So the Reds have done some good pitching development. Maybe they see something in Mike Minor, but um, I mean, to me, this is kind of a non-factor of a trade, honestly. So um, definitely not. The Reds got a guy who's probably an average to below average starter, and the Royals got a guy that's a little bit cheaper and is an average to below average reliever. So
Yeah, I don't think this deal makes sense for either side really. Like the Reds are just trying to shed payroll and they get a high price starter, while the Royals get a reliever that's not really going to do anything for them, and it doesn't really make all that much sense from either side. So it's pretty much whatever. But let's jump over to the big trade that we had happen, and that's the Blue Jays acquiring All-Star third baseman Matt Chapman for a package of prospects, including Gunnar Hoglund, infielder Kevin Smith, and left-handed pitchers Zach Loge and Kirby Sneed.
yeah, so starting off with Matt Chapman, and the first thing you see when you see him is his defense. It's good. It's real good. I mean, he is a elite of the elite defender. He's probably the best defensive player and infielder in baseball that doesn't play short. Um, you know, he's won Gold Gloves 2 or 3 times. He's great. You look at his offense as he's not quite like a Andrelton Simmons type player that's just straight up only defense. Like he's still a good offensive player. He had really broken out offensively in 2018 and 2019, where he was honestly an all-star caliber offensive player and an elite defender. Put up 6.7 WAR in 2018, a 139 WRC plus. 2019 put up 6.1 WAR, a 125 WRC plus. The problem for him has been though that his strikeout rate has absolutely spiked over the last 2 years. 2020, you look at it, he didn't play the full season. He was actually injured at the end of the 2020 season, but last year, but his strikeout rate was at 35%, which you think small sample size, whatever. Last year, 2021, 32.5% strikeout rate. That rivals like a Joey Gallo type. And his offense was all the way down to league average. So, you think of him as maybe, I don't know what was going on last year, but if he brings his 2019, 2018 level, self to the plate and playing in Toronto, which is nice hitters park, he could be, back to even higher heights than he reached then. But he's definitely a good player and a guy that was, a great guy for them to pick up. I mean, if Oakland probably should have traded him, before the season, but last year, but because there was a lot of rumors of that been going on a while. But definitely, a little puzzling his offensive season in 2021. We'll see if he bounces back. If he bounces back, this is a spectacular trade that's kind of along the lines of that Josh Donaldson trade that Toronto made a while back. If he doesn't bounce back, he's still a good player and he'll be a good third baseman for them. But we'll see what happens with the offense. So
Yeah, I think basically just getting Matt Chapman out of Oakland is going to help quite a bit anyways. He's a guy who, if you look at just 2021, he was, I know it's still not great, but a 185 hitter at home, but a 234 hitter on the road. And then if you look at his career, it's been about even with the 243 to a 244 average wise hitter at least. But you did mention that strikeout rate has jumped the past couple of years. The 2020 season, I think he was battling that hip injury. I think it was before he really went down and got the surgery. So I really didn't put too much stock into that. But, he came back this year and it only dropped, about 3% down to 32.5 compared to, what his average was right around a 20, 22% strikeout guy before that. The walk rate did jump this year, which was really nice to see. So if you can keep that walk rate there and then drop that strikeout rate a little bit, I mean, he was still, an above league average hitter, just barely at a 101 this year. And with that high level defense that he brings, you mentioned probably being the best defensive player in baseball. You know, any offensive production he's going to give you is going to help. But I really do think going to, which I mentioned earlier with the Trevor Story thing, like going to one of the more hitter friendly divisions in there where you're going to be able to play it in Camden Yards, even though they're backing the fences up like 10 feet or whatever, like that's still going to be a hitter friendly ballpark. Going and playing in Fenway where you're going to have the monster as a right-handed hitter. going and playing in Yankee Stadium, which is still, the left field is not as much of a hitter friendly park as right field is there, but it's still, better than most places. So I think overall, like it's going to be a really good deal. The package you gave up, like I really like Gunnar Hoglund. Kevin Smith is a nice, interesting piece. Kirby Snead's a guy who could probably come up and be a bullpen guy right now for the A's. He got up there, I believe, like 8 innings last year for Toronto. But Hoglund's really the big money prospect in this deal that's going to come down at the end of the day. Like did the A's or the if Chapman stays around this production, did the A's win this trade by getting a guy like Hoglund?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I second that. And, they got more. This is more of a depth trade than we got one big time prospect
Right.
trade. But you could tell from the return that teams were a little bit scared of the slow season last year from Chapman offensively. But they definitely got a good return, and we'll see what happens with it. So.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump over to the last move of this episode, and that's going to be the San Diego Padres acquiring first baseman Luke Voit from the New York Yankees for prospect Justin Lang.
Yeah, so Luke Voigt is a guy who will be a pretty solid player for the Padres. He's a bad defensive player, but obviously he's in the DH is in the National League now. He could do that. 2021, he's dealt with some injuries. He actually got kind of kind of benched in favor of Rizzo. I mean, the injury was part of it. Then they brought in Rizzo, and then he was kind of behind Rizzo. And there was a little bit of drama there with him wanting to play. So the Yankees decided to ship him out. He's been a good player. Hasn't played a full season really, other than 2020, which was a shortened season to start with at 56 games. But I guess technically it was a full season because he played the same amount as everyone else who played a full season that year. But his best season really 2019 was his only season that he played over 100 games. He's never played more than 68 games other than 2019. So, he'll hit some home runs. Good power guy. His plate discipline is pretty rough. Not really a high walk guy. He's okay walking. I mean, 2019, he had 14% walk rate, but other than that, it's been more of like an 7 to 9% walk rate. He strikes out a decent clip. I mean, he's really a guy you need him to hit for a 125, 130 WRC plus for him to be a really productive big leaguer. So, but I mean, he could probably do that. We'll see what he does in San Diego, how they utilize him. Are they going to play him at first base? Are they going to DH him? We don't know what the future is like for Hosmer there. If they are able to find a way to ship out Hosmer, maybe they platoon him and, against lefties, or against right-handed pitching, Hosmer plays and Voit DHs, and maybe they have somebody that they want to, against left-handed pitching, an extra guy that they can have Voit play first and then have someone else DH or something. I don't know how they might platoon him in some ways like that, but um, definitely a trade that, they brought in a guy with some upside. And then you look at the return for it, Justin Lange. He's a pretty decent prospect. He's not super high level prospect. He's got an okay fastball. The command leaves a lot to be desired. Um, right now he's got some upside. Lefty, got some decent stuff. Probably not going to be, a superstar player, but he's 20 years old and he's a top 20 prospect in the system now. So we'll see what ends up happening with him. But definitely thought it was kind of a fair return for a guy like Luke Voigt. So.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal for either side, especially the Yankees. It was clear that they were going to move on from Voit, especially after re-signing Rizzo. They basically he fell out of favor there, and I don't know why. I guess really just the injury wise, because he had a pretty decent 2020. 2021 was rough for him to start with, and especially battling through the injury. But I still think he's going to be a guy who can easily get you close to 20 home runs a year. If he can hit 250 to 260, like you'll take it. As far as the Eric Hosmer thing, I have a feeling that some sort of a deal is going to happen here soon with him, or at least by the deadline, that they're going to trade him and offload his contract or the prospect or something. They just acquired Matt Beatty from the Dodgers as well, who's another like lefty hitting kind of first baseman, and he could play a little bit of corner outfields. And maybe some third base, but he's more of a first baseman, more of a bench first baseman. But it just, they're kind of a depth piece there that kind of makes me think that Hosmer might be shipping out, here soon, or at least by the deadline. They could be using Voit as that DH, kind of trying to help fill the production of a guy like Tommy Pham that you didn't bring back. You're going to miss Tatis a little bit, so that's another right-handed bat that's going to be out of the lineup. So you get Voit in there and just kind of help fill some of that void from the right-handed side, at least. Not that he's anywhere nearly close to Tatis. It's just the right-handed bat basically in the lineup, because when you have, I think right now you have like Machado, you're going to have Myers, but then you have Grisham, who's left-handed, Cronenworth, who's left-handed. Who knows what they're going to think about Kim? You have he's right-handed, but Hosmer, that's left-handed. You just had a lot of lefties already, so bringing in a righty that can play some first base for you, maybe you DH some as well. It makes sense, and especially for a prospect like Lang that, more profiles as a reliever, and maybe a guy who probably won't even reach the majors at any point in his career, probably anyways. But I think that's going to wrap up everything, unless you got anything else that you want to hit on.
I don't think so. I think it's exciting. We've kind of been, this episode's kind of been on the back burner for a couple weeks because of the issues. I wish we had some more time today to talk about kind of the season starts in a week from Friday, so it's like we're gonna have our prediction episode next week, but it's gonna be interesting. Pretty much all the major moves are set. Spring training honestly hasn't had tons of storylines. A couple that kind of come to mind are, Justin Verlander pitched today and looked really, really, really good coming off his Tommy John surgery. So that was something that was kind of good to see. We've seen Charlie Morton come back strong from his broken ankle. He looked good in his spring training starts. I don't think there's been too many guys who've looked bad. I don't know if you can think of anybody, but definitely, Seiya Suzuki, we talked about him earlier, but he's really struggled in his start to the spring. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, oh yeah, Bellinger's been horrible.
Yeah, I think he struck out again today so far. The game's on right now, and he struck out in his first at bat. Yeah. But I think it's been I think it was 14 strikeouts and 19 plate appearances or something so far. He's still tinkering with his swing, and I think he's already had 4 different stance and swings in the spring training so far as well. So he's fighting it. I think another storyline is, where the hell is Michael Conforto going to sign, and when is he going to sign? I think it's really puzzling that he hasn't been signed yet. I wonder if that's completely the
should have taken the qualifying offer.
Yeah, I wonder if it's completely the draft pick compensation attached to him. If he's going to be one of those guys that either an injury happens and gets signed, or if we saw with Kyle Loesch that waits until after the draft to sign, so nobody gets that draft pick compensation against him. So I think that's another big storyline. But like you mentioned, we'll have our prediction episode next week, and then any of the as these storylines kind of keep developing. It's been kind of just rushed, everything here. Nothing's been able to really develop overall. Maybe we'll hit on some of the bigger storylines next week or next week's episode as well, as it's going to be 3 or 4 days before opening day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Batfoot Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.